Welcome to the IonaHoops.com podcast with your host, Guy Flottico.
Happy holidays, happy holidays. The Iona Gales keep winning. Oof, that was awful. But nevertheless, it's season 3, episode 11 of the IonaHoops.com podcast. And we've got more recaps of the St Bonaventure and Princeton games and a preview of Darth Vader versus Luke Skywalker. If Vader was the good guy, of course. I'm talking about the Patino on Patino violence we've got coming up at the pit this weekend. And we've got Lobos beat writer Geoff Grammer to help us preview that one. But before we make that left turn at Albuquerque, look that it went up, youngins. We're going to bypass the Iona Iotas and get right into the recaps of the St Bonaventure and Princeton games. After the St. Louis win, during the post-game presser, I asked Coach Patino how to avoid any sort of letdown moving forward after such an A-plus performance. Maybe I'm a bit psychic or psycho. It depends how you look at it. I don't know. But for about 32 minutes or so, we got a hodgepodge of Gales hoops. Iona struggled on the glass and had an uncharacteristic amount of turnovers, and several Gales simply were not playing all that well, and Iona found themselves trailing by 1 to the Bonnies and Darryl Banks III. What happened then, though, I really can't explain. Maybe it was Iona's press, spirited by Oz Shima, finally exhausting St. Bonaventure. I'm not really sure. But the Gales absolutely owned the Bonnies the rest of the way to the tune of 19-3 run to claim a 72-57 win in Brooklyn and another A-10 scalp. We were all waiting for a breakout game from Nelly Jr. Joseph, and this was it, 24 points and 10 boards. Walter Clayton didn't shoot it great, but still managed 16 points, 7 boards, and 4 assists. Dennis Jenkins really struggled, and yet he too ended up with 11 points, 4 boards, and 7 assists. What kind of day was it on the offensive end? The Gales turned to Parker Weiss, who responded with a career-high 8 points. The Iona D continued to do good things, holding Bonaventure to 39% and turning them over 21 times. But this was a dangerous game, and Iona survived. Says a lot about the makeup of this group. Here's Coach Patino on the win.
I've been lucky in my life because I've coached a lot of great people, from the Knicks to the Celtics to Kentucky to Louisville to BU to Providence. It is the most incredible privilege to coach this group because nothing was going right for us, and they just dug in, paid no attention to how they were playing. All they did was pay attention to winning the game. And it's really a great privilege to coach these two guys and the other 12 in the locker room. So I'm real excited. They're a very well-coached team, and our full court press was just incredible tonight, so we needed it. It's been our MO this year. Last year we had all these goals, and undefeated in the conference, doing this, doing that, and then you don't achieve it, and you get that down. This year we just said, every practice, every game, as if it's our last one on earth. And they bought into it. That's all they think about. They like to practice. They don't like to practice long, but they like to practice. And they give it to me every day. I've had some great teams, but this team is a treat, absolute treat.
Sometimes it's just not about the stats or the style points. Tonight was one of those nights. Iona was, quite frankly, outplayed by Princeton most of this one, and to that end, the Tigers led by 10 with about 14 minutes to go. But the Gales, as they seem to find a way to do, respond, and this time with a 13-1 run, and Walter Clayton simply took over the game down the stretch as Iona survived Princeton 70-64. This was not a great Iona performance. Princeton outshot Iona 52% to 42% overall, 35% from 3 versus 28 for Iona. Rebounded Iona by 1, had a field day inside with 38 paint points. I mean, it just wasn't meant to be until it was. Dennis Jenkins carried Iona for the better part of the game, finishing with 20 points. And Clayton was just huge late, as I said. He got to 20 points after a slow first half. Also had 6 boards and 5 assists. Nelly was bottled up quite a bit and double, triple teamed, but managed 10 and 8. Next highest scorer, how about Cruz Davis, who scored 7 straight points during that aforementioned 13-1 surge. So this was one that Iona just willed over to the win column, but it was a strange one in a strange setting, and perhaps a mini trap game of sorts with New Mexico looming. But to close the book on this one, perhaps a sign of growth for the team here. Iona faltered late at Hofstra. They faltered late versus Santa Clara in Vegas. And then the other day, they owned the latter stages against St Bonaventure. And today, this one was tied at 63 with 109 to go. And Iona closes it out with a 7-1 run. That's what great teams do, and this team is showing signs of turning a corner, still with 4 non-conference games to go. Okay, let's take a look at our next opponent, the undefeated New Mexico Lobos. I don't think anyone, not even diehard New Mexico Lobo fans, had undefeated on December 14th on their bingo card. But here we are. I mean, this just feels like a really tough spot for the Gales. Back both before and after the loss to Hofstra, I noted that we just don't play enough true road games, I think, under Rick Pitino. Hey, road games are hard. We know that. That's why Pitino, I don't think, wants to play them. And this is a long way to go for this one game, though I realize it's a stopover before the Diamond Head. But let's take a closer look at the Lobos. This is a great offensive team, top 50 Ken Palm, led by a trio of stars. Jalen House, a senior guard Jamal Mashburn is a name we know, and senior 8 grad forward Morris Udeze. Udeze leads the way with 18 points per game, 6.6 boards, shooting 61% from the floor. Mashburn's at 17.2 points per game while hitting 41% from 3. And House makes a home for the Lobos, 16.5 points, 5 assists, 49% from 3. Oh, by the way, all 3 of those guys hit at least 75% from the line as well. Another weapon for the Lobos is Josiah Alec, 6'8", senior forward. He averages 9.4 points, 8.2 boards, shoots 56% from the floor. So, lots of talent for New Mexico. Collectively, the Lobos are good shooters, both inside and out. They get to the line, and they don't turn it over. Iona's defense has been quite ridiculous this year, just outside the top 50 nationally entering tonight. So this is a major league test to the defense travels theory for sure, as we keep talking about, hey, defense travels. Well, this is the spot to test that out. On the other side of the ball, New Mexico's pretty good defensively, but not great. And a weakness they have is defending the 3. So Iona's 3-point shooting percentage will be something to watch here. But make no mistake, this game's got a lot of star power. Both teams boast high-powered backcourts and impressive bigs. The major question is, can Iona get over the top in a true road game against a quality opponent? We'll see Sunday night. For more on the Lobos, we now welcome Geoff Grammer from the Albuquerque Journal. Geoff Grammer has been a college basketball writer for the Albuquerque Journal for the past 10 years, so he's got lots of experience with all things Lobos, all things the Pit, all things Richard Pitino. Geoff, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me on.
All right, so this is a fun one here between father and son, and it came about rather uniquely. Can you tell us from your point of view how it came to be?
Sure. Well, first of all, when Richard Pitino was hired in New Mexico last year, so I guess last April, might have been March, might have been April. It was last year, just within days of him getting fired at Minnesota after 8 years. He was hired at New Mexico, and right at his introductory press conference, it came up actually then that he and his dad had kind of already talked about, man, we should play each other. Let's get a game. And he said in his introductory presser that his dad called him up and said, hey, we should play in Vegas sometime. And so I asked him, I said, are you saying that Rick Pitino's afraid to come to the Pit? And I asked him that in front of the introductory presser, which Lobo fans sure ate up. And Richard Pitino, being great sense of humor, by the way, Richard Pitino has, said, yeah, I think that's what he's saying here. So they were kind of joking about it, but also, not entirely kidding when they said, this is a type of game with the rebuilding Lobo program that used to be, 10 years ago, actually, when I first started covering this team, they got as high as the 3 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Yep.
They were ranked. They were really good. Now they've fallen on hard times, and longest postseason drought is the one they're in right now that they've ever had. So the rebuild that Richard Pitino took on last year, he needed, from a scheduling perspective, to first of all, he had to get through that first year. He got some good transfers. They won 13 games. You could see the potential, but last year wasn't going to be the year that they made a whole lot of noise, I guess, you could say. But they knew coming into even just as quickly as year 2, they might be able to really make us put a stamp on we're back in the Mountain West. We could be good again. I don't think Richard even thought they'd be maybe quite this good this quick, and he's commented on that before. But coming into this year, he knew that they needed to start getting games that, if they can get top 25 teams into the pit, they would do it in a heartbeat. But it doesn't have a lot of reward for a lot of even regional top 25 teams to come to Albuquerque and risk a loss and in a tough place to play in the pit. So, the Arizonas, the Texas Tech hasn't returned a call for scheduling from UNM in many years. This is even when they were a bad team. Colorado's come a few times, but there's not a whole lot of really good Division I programs out west, especially that are willing to come play in the pit. So he wanted to get maybe top 100 level teams that might do home and homes, and it made perfect sense to see if, because of the attention it would get. And again, as part of his rebuild, he has said attention is part of what we need to get these fans excited again. And he said, let's see if we can't work something out with Iona and get a Pitino versus Pitino in the pit kind of showdown. And sure enough, they lined up a home and home. I will say that I should have looked it up. I can't remember which game it was, but Rick Pitino watched a game in the pit last year.
That's right.
I think it was right around finals week, maybe, because there was about a week off between games. And during that time, he came out, visited his grandkids, of course. And while he was here, he watched a Lobo game in the pit. And since that time, I don't think it was announced at that time, but we knew then that they were already working on something. And so that's kind of where we're at in terms of why he, on this end, wanted a game like Iona. It doesn't make a whole lot of geographical sense for either team to fly from New York to New Mexico, but here we are. There's obviously a connection that's going to get a little bit of buzz this week because both teams are top 100 teams right now.
Yeah.
And both teams obviously have the cachet of pretty well-known coaches. And the Lobos, I don't think either father or son realized might potentially be 10-0 going into that game.
Mm. Yeah, and here's the funny thing too. You're talking about having a hard time getting games in your home building. I mean, certainly the pit has a long-standing reputation of just swallowing up top 25 visitors. Of course, Iona's gym, much smaller, does not have that kind of cachet, but we just had St. Louis come in and take a thumping, and so that's not going to help us get anybody to ever come here. But one thing that Rick likes to do is play games in some of the arenas nearby. And I'm curious to see if indeed the New Mexico return game happens. I can't imagine it's going to be on our campus. It would be more likely in one of the local arenas in the area, I would think. I would be shocked if New Mexico actually plays at our 2,600 seat facility.
Well, I would say to that, like I'm certainly New Mexico wouldn't mind wherever they play, but I do think that geographically you guys are in a spot where that doesn't really, certainly wouldn't bother the local fans. I don't think that much if they're still basically in the city or in the area.
Yeah.
In New Mexico, the nearest arena that could hold it, there is one other arena here in the Albuquerque area that could hold it, but it's smaller. But 3 hours south at New Mexico State University, there's a 13,000 seat arena, and other than that, you're talking about 3 or 4 hours away. Though there's not really even another place to go hold it anywhere within a flight, really, a quick flight, but about an hour flight, no matter where you want to go from Albuquerque before you even get another arena this big. So
Wow.
You come out this way, it's going to be the pit, or you're going to have to go somewhere else. It's
Right.
like fairly far.
Yeah. And of course, Iona built this in knowing that they were as a stopover because we're going to Hawaii right after that.
Yeah.
Of
It's a
course,
pit stop. if you
Yeah,
will.
that's exactly right. And Iona fans, I think, would have loved to have seen another game out that in your way, just to make it more of a reason to go. Even somebody like I would like to go to a game like that. That's a long way to go for one game.
For
I'm
one, yeah.
curious. I am also curious because, like you said, same reasoning. Will New Mexico schedule somebody else out this way? If they come back this way to play Iona next year, so something to keep an eye on. They pair another game with that somewhere along the
Yeah.
way, maybe a Seton Hall or a Rutgers or somebody along those lines, or St.
Yeah.
John's or somebody. So interesting to see how that goes. So yeah, you mentioned that maybe the Lobos a little bit ahead of schedule about where they are with their record and how they've performed this year. Why? What has made them a little better than anybody expected? Maybe.
Well, so and I haven't just covered the Lobos. I've covered other college teams. I covered the Mountain West as a whole, and I will say this, I've covered some pretty good Lobo teams. Steve Alford's last year here, I think, was one of the better teams out west. They were a 3 seed. They lost to Harvard in the first round, so they're certainly not a team that's going to get remembered by many people outside of Albuquerque. But they had a team. This was 10 years ago, the 2012-13 season, that won 29 games, and they had guard. I mean, it sounds really basic what I'm about to say, but they had guards and they had bigs and they had experience. I mean, I think their entire starting lineup was over 21 years old.
Mhm.
I think that they had an all-conference caliber guard. He was Mountain West Freshman of the Year. They had a guy named Tony Snell who until this year, this is his first year that hasn't played in the NBA. After that year, put together a 10-year career. Not a whole lot of starts, but an NBA talent guy. They had two centers, really two power forward bigs, and Alex Kirk and Cameron Bairstow, that both went on to the NBA. Real brief stint for Alex Kirk, a couple years at least for Cameron Bairstow, but those were the level of players they had a year ago. I don't know if this team has necessarily a bunch of NBA talent, but what they have, they got four really, really good guards. So if you want to try and stop their guards, that's fine. And a year ago, that's what happened. People just loaded up on stopping the perimeter, stopping the drive into the paint, and they didn't have any big men to punish. But this offseason, what the Lobos did and what they succeeded at was they really identified three things that this roster needed. And I've never seen an offseason as successful in checking the boxes with real specific needs as what the Lobos had this offseason. Obviously, every offseason you want to get a new, maybe a new big man, or in recruiting you want to get a guard you can get. But what they got, if you count going back to last recruiting cycle for a freshman, they really needed three things. They needed a backup point guard. They needed experience, just players that had played at the D1 level a little bit more, and they needed big men bad. So they got two forwards in Josiah Alec, came from UMKC, and he's a fourth-year forward who's been their starting power forward since the day he got on campus and has been tremendous. He's a very versatile guy, can run the floor great. And they got Morrissey Daisy, who's a fifth-year guy because of COVID. He's playing his fifth college year. So that checks off the experience and the big man box pretty quick when you got a guy who started almost 100 games already at Wichita State. He comes here. He's now leading the Mountain West in scoring. He's shooting 61, 62%. I don't have it in front of me, but he's shooting over 60%. And it's because they've paired those bigs up with these two dynamic guards in particular. But really, they have now four guards that could start in the Mountain West. And it's Jalen House, who's the son of Eddie House, played in the NBA.
Yep.
And was the all-time leading scorer at Arizona State, where Jalen transferred from. Didn't work out for him quite the same way, but he transferred here last year. And then Jamal Mashburn Jr. And really, that's the starting point of the Richard Pitino era in New Mexico. Was Jamal Mashburn Jr. Was at Minnesota.
Yep.
Obviously, the son of Jamal Mashburn. That's how the juniors work. And Jamal played for Rick. And so the relationship was already there. And when Richard Pitino got Jamal to Minnesota and then got fired after Jamal's freshman season, Jamal, either senior or junior, one of the two, called Richard Pitino up, I think like the day he got fired, and said, just tell us where you're going. We're following you. And Richard told them, hold on. First of all, let's see if I'm going somewhere. I might take a year off. But also, make sure it's right for you. I appreciate it. It's flattering that you're so loyal to me, but just hold on. Let's see where I'm going. And then with Rick, kind of some of the influence that he had, telling Richard that a place like Albuquerque, when it's going, it's the only game in town. It is the pro team in the state, the Lobo basketball team. So when it gets going, this place gets packed. And I think from their, really even from their Kentucky roots, Like they loved the idea of being at a place where basketball is the thing. So he picks New Mexico and Jamal and tells Jamal Mashburn Jr. like, okay, I think you can come here and enjoy it because they do care about basketball and it isn't that far off from where it once was, where it was winning Mountain West championships,
Right.
and we can get there pretty quick. Again, I don't think they thought they'd be there this quick, but they should contend this year. So they had a foundation of two All Mountain West guards last year, in Jalen House and Jamal Mashburn returning. They added to it two guys who I think will contend for, I'm not talking first team necessarily, but first, second, third team in forwards, and Josiah Alec and Morris Udeze, who's right now leading the Mountain West in scoring. But they also got really lucky in a point guard freshman out of California named Donovan Dent, who ended up being Mr. California last year. And you can look through all the rivals or the 247, the whatever scouting rankings you want, and see all the kids from California. He was voted better than all of them last year, and his name is Donovan Dent. He was the best player in California last year and really got overlooked. Going into his senior year, Pac-12 teams really started trying to recruit him hard, but he had already committed to New Mexico and stayed loyal to that commitment. And he is potentially going to be the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. He's just a very elite level passer, and he's been the backup point guard that they needed to really give Jalen House a breather every now and then.
Hmm.
So they checked all the boxes. They checked the backup point guard. They got a little lucky at just how good and ready to play Donovan Dent was as a freshman. But they checked the experience and the big man thing with the two transfers they got. And they've been really good because of it, really balanced because of it.
So, and the schedule you guys have played thus far has been fun as well, and it's given you a chance to really test some of these guys, and passing obviously with a perfect record. So you've had some interesting opponents that you've survived, and now you have Iona coming in. Of course, there's a buzz with Rick Pitino coming in, but how much do people know about or follow Iona out there? I mean, are you guys watching to the point where you've seen the last two results that Iona's put up, where they took a good St. Louis team and just blew them out, and then yesterday playing St. Bonaventure, another high-end Atlantic 10 team at a neutral site, and beating them by 15? Is that something where people are like, oh, all right, well, this isn't just some random mid-major coming in next week,
Right. I think they realized that even without Rick Pitino, that Iona's a good opponent. But I will say this about Lobo fans: as passionate as they are, and they were, top 50 in average home attendance the first 50 years the pit was open. It's dropped into the 30s the last several years, but the team hasn't been as good. But like, they show up and they love their Lobos, but for the most part, it is they love their Lobos kind of fan base. So they don't know a whole lot about non-conference opponents in particular, unless they're a ranked team. But with the Patino connection, I think a few more of them certainly pay attention a little bit. And anytime they're on the schedule for this season, there certainly are there's the element of fans that starts showing, be it on social media or just if they call into maybe a local radio show. There are a couple sports talk radio shows here in Albuquerque that Lobo basketball talk is starting to really pick up now that they're undefeated. But there are those types of fans that will call in and say, their upcoming opponent so and so just beat so and so, and a lot of score checks. So yeah, there's a little bit of awareness. I wouldn't say the Lobo fan base is always the most aware of opposing teams, but in this case, I do think that there will be some awareness of Iona that goes beyond just knowing that the dad of their favorite coach is on the other bench.
And here's another element that could open some eyes as we get to like the day before and the day of the game. You look at Ken Palm, and I don't know how much you're into the predictive analytics and all that. This is going to be a very low point spread, and I think that's one of those things that people don't think about until you see it. And you figure 3-4 points for being at home. Ken Palm has this as like a 1-point game or something ridiculous like that. Last I looked.
Well, the Lobos have been underdogs twice, and one of them against SMU. We've all kind of come to learn that SMU isn't exactly having the year anywhere close that maybe the predictive analytics thought it was coming in.
Yep.
And it certainly wasn't the type of season, frankly, that UNM thought when they signed a home and home a year ago with SMU when they were, I think, around 60, and Ken Palm came in, kind of blew the doors off the Lobos in the pit last year. So this year the Lobos thought, oh, that'll be a really good true road game, going to SMU. They were underdogs when they went out to SMU and beat them by 21.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, then the St. Mary's game, the Lobos were underdogs there and ended their 23-game home win streak. So if you look at the Lobos' schedule, it absolutely doesn't scream out at you, wow, this undefeated team should be ranked, and they did receive some points in the latest AP poll, but they're not ranked yet. It doesn't scream at you other than one game really, and that's that St. Mary's game to date anyway.
Yeah.
I do think that this week that they're in right now, between the San Francisco game and between the Iona game on Sunday, this has sort of been the deciding week. And I've told people, I'm an AP voter. I'm one of the 62 AP voters this year, and I've told people that even as the local voter, like I'm not ready to vote them yet. And although I have no problem with anybody that's voting the Lobos ranked right now, because I do think they have all the pieces of a very balanced team, and they've not just been beating what is an extremely tough schedule so far. They've been blowing the doors, off like 20-point wins, 18-point wins. They've been doing it by frankly, they've been doing it the way you're supposed to do it if they're lesser teams. They haven't really struggled yet against some of those lesser teams. And then the one real big test they had, they didn't just play tight against the St. Mary's team that's going to be perennially in the top 25-ish of all those computer rankings, and their perennial NCAA tournament team. They went in there and beat them, and that was after falling behind 13-2. In the first 10 minutes of that game, they were just getting beat up. And then they came back and beat them on a home court that, St. Mary's had won 23 straight including Gonzaga wins through the years. And it was a really impressive win. And that was the first point where I realized, okay, maybe their only test really to this point of the season, but they certainly passed it.
Well, Geoff, I think this has been a great educational call for Iona fans, because obviously we only know so much, and just reading box scores and the occasional story. And that's the difference of some East Coast bias here that we experienced a little bit, maybe. But it's going to be a fun trip for us, regardless of result, I think. And again, I hope we do see a return game next year, again, regardless of result. I thank you for your time in helping us understand what we're getting ourselves into here.
Yeah, I appreciate it. It's fun, and it will be the toughest test, I think, other than the St. Mary's game. I think this will certainly be the toughest test the Lobos have had all season, and they need some of these. There are a couple good teams in their league, so they're going to need these tests, and I don't think anybody here expects it to be an easy game by any stretch of the imagination.
All right, well, appreciate your time, Geoff, and we'll be following you along the way here. Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again to Geoff Grammer for stopping by to prep us for the War of the Patinos. This game is going to tell us a lot about our Iona Gales for sure. Can't wait to see how it all turns out. As we wait our visit to the pit, happy Iowa holidays to you all, and go Gales.
Thank you for listening to this edition of the IonaHoops.com podcast. This podcast is a production of IonaHoops.com with publisher Guy Filatico. The opinions shared during this podcast are those of Guy Filatico, IonaHoops.com, and any featured guests. This podcast is not affiliated with Iona University Athletics or the university itself. Thank you for supporting IonaHoops.com.